How is everyone going? So we are live at the PhantomCave studio today, and today we are going to be reviewing Giantsize Phantom number 19. So let's into it. I hope you this interview or this review, and let's get into it. So yeah, let's get into it. As per usual, the cover is done by magnificent Glenn Lubston, who I think we will be talking about Glenn Lubston on this week's Saturday show. So yeah, I think with Glenn Lubston, right, he's amazing. He's absolutely an amazing person. I've actually interviewed him what in 2020 I think, and he's an amazing person, does absolute brand spanking good covers. But anyways, this this cover that he has done in the last what week or so, which we will be talking about in the Saturday live stream, this this cover that he has done for the 2022 annual, I think would be up with, I would say, up with one of the biggest and greatest covers of all time. Let me get it slightly right. There we go. So yeah, like I was saying, I reckon that Glenn Lubston, like I said, he's an amazing artist. Just he's an amazing artist. So let's just get into it. So this book, it is about, basically it's about Brazilian stories. It's got the Phantom in it. It's got Sir Falcon, the Phantom Ranger, the Shadow, and heaps more other characters in this book as well. But this book that I will be showing you right now, this book, I quite enjoyed this book. Like, with the first story we've got here right now is the Phantom Kidnapping of Guren, which is I would say, a very good story. Now, the second one that appears on page 27 is Sir Falcon Espionage. The third story for this week is on page 47, which is The Shadow, the Human Fly, which is just magnificent. As I said, I quite enjoyed this book, so this is probably going to be one of my favorites this year, or from last year. So we have the Phantom Ranger, the Final Vengeance. I love that one. On page 87, we have the Sir Falcon, Prince of Peril. And on one of the last ever pages for this year, we have the Few Characters in Brazil, a article done by Neville Bain. So, the first story is the kidnapping of Guren. Now, the first thing we're going to see firstly in the story, obviously, as I said, it is one of the Brazilian stories, so it's not actually going to be, because it's a Brazilian story, it's obviously not going to be about, or it's not going to be a story that has been done by like an Egmont artist like we usually see in Phantom comic books. So the artist that I think has done this for is, it doesn't actually, I don't think it actually says, but it was published in Brazil by RGE, which is Rio Graphica Editoria Ltd. And it was published in Phantasma 100, issue number 112 in 1966. Now, first thing we've got to point out here with these Brazilian stories, it's especially with the Brazilian stories, and also with the art, and also with, I think, the Italian ones as well. Now, I'm saying this because this story was obviously first published in 1966. So what has happened in 1966? 6 years ago, before this publication actually came out, it is I would say the first couple of years, you'd say first 5 or 6 years of Mr. legendary Seymour Barry doing work on the Sunday and the dailies. Now, what has Seymour Barry has what has Seymour Barry got to do with the evolution of the Brazilian artists and the Italian guys? Now, as I have seen and as I have read on articles, a lot of, I think, especially the Italian ones, a lot of the Italian sort of let me get that right, artists, artists, um, a lot of the times when we actually, how's it going, Whispering Grove? A lot of the times when we see, say, like an Italian artist, say, we would say Fratelli Spada, for instance. Most of the artworks that you would see in the stories of those books that were published by Fratelli Spada, I'm guessing, would be in some way influenced by Mr. Seymour Barrett. Now, why do I know that? Is because I've read articles about it, and I think a couple of artists that I can think of are like people like, I guess, uh, it's not maybe Romando Felmang, maybe Germany, Germany. I can't think of his first name. And um, what's his name? I think Massimino Gambrelli also did influenced by Seymour Barry, I think. Now, if I'm not correct, please correct me in the comment section down here. Now let's get into it. So this story is about a mysterious tribe. Now this tribe we don't actually hear, well, today actually, in today's world, we don't actually hear much about this tribe. Now this tribe, it is basically known for thieving. It's a very, what you'd firstly call it, a very mysterious tribe. But then, if they hear something that is worth a lot of money or a lot of, well, they can get their tribe get rich, then they're obviously going to try and steal it. So this story, it revolves around the Phantom's treasure, and the Phantom's treasure being a very rich substance of, because it's worth money to a lot of people, and a lot of people take advantage of the Phantom's treasure. And the reason why they take advantage of the Phantom's treasure is because they want to steal it and use it for unhealthy or very devilish um, things that they want to do with the treasure. Now, how does Guren come into this story? Guren, obviously, he basically says, no, you're not coming into the Skull Cave. We do not believe you, and all that sort of stuff. And while this is actually happening, while this thing's actually happening, the Phantom is actually on vacation. So you would say it would be a great moment for this tribe to basically steal the treasure, you would say. But what then happens is that Guren obviously gets kidnapped. Diana, at that time, is obviously going out with the Phantom. Diana tries and saves Guren by venturing on her own, and then the Phantom catches up with everyone, and the Phantom is then, I think, questioning the chief. So I'll read some panels. So the Phantom, I must tell the so what is it? After a long ride to the Skull Cave, I need to learn occup- what occurred exactly. Soon after, and that's what happened. So basically, the story's been told to the Phantom. He now knows what has happened, and and they then go on to say that Guren shouldn't have let them near the Skull Cave. Not Guren's best decision, not at all. Stay here, Diana. You'll be safe. Now, how does Diana come into this again? How does she come into this again? The Phantom is obviously, well, in a lot of trouble right now because at that same time when the Phantom is trying to rescue Guran, um, there's a big storm that has come and um, trashed, you would say, the trash where the Phantom is actually going to try and rescue Guran, basically. And then we do not hear, the other people do not hear from the Phantom for a while. The Phantom actually very strongly is so just as the Phantom is passing near it, ah, it happens very quickly, not giving the Phantom time to react. Hero and Devil are unharmed by the tree, and so the Phantom gets, I would say, gets crushed by a falling tree. Their master taking the worst of it. The ghost who walks lies unconscious on the ground. The fallen branches prevent Hero and Devil going for help. Just as quickly as the storm started, it stops. The next day, the Phantom is still trapped. The exiled Intongo warriors come by on their way to their new village. And so, look, the Phantom's pets. What are they doing here? So the I think they exiled in Tonga's help the Phantom, and then they realize the Phantom isn't with them. So when they realize that the Phantom isn't actually very conscious at the moment and still doesn't know who he is, which then means he is suffering from amnesia, um, the warriors then take advantage by they take advantage, but one of them says, um, "You don't know us, Phantom? Phantom, who's that? Let's take him to the village." Hero and Devil, outnumbered, can do nothing to help, but the bandar named Zimba watches nearby. What's going on? Why did the Phantom leave Hero and Devil and go with the Intongos? Tongos. I must talk to Diana immediately. And then obviously the band goes to talk to um, Diana, which then leads Diana to think that is the Phantom hurt? Why has the Phantom left Hero and Devil? So then Diana goes and looks for the Phantom. In doing so, she basically is led into a trap by the Warriors. You would say that she's led into a trap by the Warriors because of the bait that has been handed to her. So then the bait is then the Phantom. So how does this all come about? This all finishes off in the next couple of pages, and the Phantom then gains reconsciousness. They all live happily ever after, and the Phantom basically destroys the tribe, and gets his treasure back. And then we finally find out that the gold that the exiled Intogo had stole was actually fake. So that is a good ending to the story, I would say. Now the next story is Sir Falcon in Espionage. So we get obviously this the artwork is done by Sinati, which was, as we find out in the later parts of this video and the later parts of this book, there's actually a bit of history on that as well, which is pretty interesting. I actually read it and it was quite interesting. So we have a little thing down here. So the first pub this is first this story was first and this comic is first published in Portuguese in Aguirre Negra number 98 by Rio Gráfica Editoria, Brazil 1966. The creative translation and art restoration is done by Neville Bain from 2021. So, as a lot of people know, Sir Falcon in espionage 600 years ago, bloodthirsty raiders stormed the castle of a noble family, slaughtering the defenders and cruelly killing the lord, father of a brave knight who was away fighting in the wars. That brave knight comes home, obviously finds out that his father has been killed by um, intruders, and we start well off with a story. So the Sir Falcon, he's currently on, I would say, because this is an espionage story, he notices that there's a guy who comes off the shore, and then this guy helps Sir Falcon basically destroy an army of what you'd call Nazis, basically. And this story is going around sort of war type theme. So I quite like these types of stories, like the secret agents sort of stuff, and um I quite like the artwork in these stories, especially the next couple after this. Although a couple of the panels in one of the story I would think would be a tiny little bit rushed, but you get that in the hard jobs, don't you? When you obviously run a schedule, you can't obviously always make the perfect figure or something like that. So the Sir Falcon and I I can't remember this guy's name, but the Sir Falcon and this guy actually are in a you would call a tight situation. So then Sir Falcon's dog or wolf at the time brings, you would say, a diversion. So Falcon and the guy army person get away. Sir Falcon goes looking for the general or the commander, and the commander tries and gets away, but Sir Falcon destroys him, and we live happily ever after. But that general unfortunately plunges out a window. Great ending. Just great ending. Great ending. Great ending. How many times do I actually have to say that? Really? How many? So we have the Shadow Story, Aguera Negra magazine. I like when few publications obviously does these sorts of publications where they're taking a international comic or international story. They've done it a few times. Like I think they did a lot, heaps of international stories in the Phantom World special series, which obviously wrapped up in, I think, 2020. Um, yeah, that series, it was, most of that series was consisting of reprints from Italian stories, and only one publication in that series actually looked at Brazilian stories, which was awesome. And it's the same with this sort of publication. Now, this sort of publication, I would say, would be one of my favorites in this run. I would say this would be one of my favorites. One, because of the art. Two, because the series focus around old and retro characters, which I have technically fallen in love with. And three, it's just most of the stories are great stories. Like they're great narrative pieces, especially this story. Especially this story. Now, I was trying to pick who is the human fly, which we will find out quite soon. So the shadow, there's burglary, things happening inside a mysterious $1 million apartment with $1 million stakes. Oh, I just love that. Ah, that was so good. That was so good. So there's this person called the human fly. Now, who is this human fly? Has a person seen it? And what has happened to the jewels? So, what has happened to the jewels? Um, Obviously, all places that a $1 million man or $1 billion person has been staying at and own, their jewels have been getting stolen and burgled into, I would say, a bag. Now, at the end of this story, the Shadow as Jimmy Gray actually, obviously, he finds out who it is. But I would say this story is quite good. Now, the Shadow actually baits the human fly and waits for him to come. Now, the human fly firstly escapes, but he doesn't get away with the jewels. The second time, however, the shadow is up for him, and obviously, we find out that the whole time that we were trying to figure out who had done it, a who done it story, it was the waitress, the waiter, this guy, so damn good. Now, I I know I know this story, like I know this story. I feel like this story has stuff to do with Death in Paradise. They, I just think it has stuff to do with it. I know this story was published a few very long a few decades before Death Paradise, but you know, it could just be the waiter, or it could just be the Barbara, or it could just be, um, it just could be anyone, I would say. Now, this one's also a good one. But firstly, look at that art. It's so damn cool. It's just, uh, this is just one of my absolute favorites. It's just one of my absolute favorites. Now, we got the Phantom Ranger story by Walmir Amarul. Now, the artwork was a team up between Walmir and M. Sardella, I would say. And obviously, at the back end of this book, it actually explains why the Phantom Ranger's costume has actually changed over the time of him being published in Brazil, which is quite interesting. We'll get to that. Now, in this story, obviously, before this story, the Phantom Ranger had actually stopped this infamous gang from obviously burgling and stealing stuff off people. Now, there's a person who doesn't like what's happening. So that person, that killer, that is after a lot of people on his death list, actually he kills I think three or four people, and until So firstly, he kills he kills he well okay, so he kills the blacksmith, he kills a gambler sort of person, and he kills another person. He kills three people on his death list. I'm not it could be five or six that were supposed to be killed but wasn't. So this is where we find out that the blacksmith gets killed. He is shot by a pistol. The gambler guy that owns the you'd say a big house gets killed, making it too easy for the killer. Phantom Ranger finally finds out that who they were going to look for has actually been killed. When all this is going on, who is actually the person who is killing the group of people? Who is it? Why is he doing it? Obviously, they find out that there's a missing brother. There's a brother on the loose, and the brother had been associated with the Red Jackson gang or something. I don't know. And yeah, who is it? Who is that person? Who is the killer? Who is next on his list? It is the Phantom Ranger. It's not Phantom Ranger's not the killer. He's the hero in the story, Bradley. Who actually is the killer? It is the sheriff. Now the sheriff doesn't really want to go to prison, does he? Or get he's he doesn't really want to get hanged at the moment, so he commits suicide. Yeah, he commits suicide, which is sad, but that yeah. Um Yeah, and that's where we end the story. Now, this is the last story. This is an also Falcon story from the Aguera Negra series. Beautiful, beautiful drawings again. So, to relay off this story, it's basically the Sir Falcon. Currently he's on a vacation, you'd say. He gets a call from a private investigator. The private investigator tells that there's a oldish king that is wanting to is not that well. So there's people in his circle, you would say, or royal circle, that are wanting to conspire against him. But to stop all that, there's also a inheritance person that is actually going to move into the throne, and one of those people that is around the circle of the king actually doesn't want to um, doesn't want that kid to be on the throne basically, and in doing so in doing so the kid actually survives, and the assassination plot actually the first guy that tries to kill the kid, he actually gets stabbed in the back by a dagger. Now, who had through that dagger? It's actually I think the general or something for the defense arts. He gets punched in the face because of his heavy breathing. So Falcon relays the story back to the king, and the king says thank you. Now we come to the article. So this article, it goes through firstly it goes through the history of a few publications with its associated characters, including Sir Falcon, Phantom Ranger, the Phantom, and a few others or something. And a couple of the Brazilian publishers back in those days, back in the 1960s, 1950s, and a few decades after, they were starting to publish um, Phantom Ranger reprints from a few publication stories. They were starting to publish some Sir Falcon stories, and by the time that they obviously had gone through all the reprints, and through everything else, they started to create. Obviously, they started doing magnificent covers like this, but they also started to create their own stories and their own interpretation of the Phantom Ranger, especially because the Phantom Ranger in Brazil, so it had a couple of costume changes. Obviously, it had this one here where you can see the mascot thing on the neck. You can also see that in the original design, there's actually white pants, but when we move over to the next picture, there's actually been a change. We don't see the mascot anymore. We don't see the white pants anymore because obviously your white pants are going to get dirty, aren't they? So they change it to be more real, realistic, more of a appropriate design, but also they give the mask's design on the mask and they put it on the belt, which is quite cool. And then I think that's all they do with the changing of things. They also obviously they had a big publication line of the Phantom, and by the time they had finished publishing Phantom Ranger and associated characters, the publication dates of all the issues that had appeared in their books and all the characters that had appeared in their books had and obviously it's been lasting a long time since few publications actually ceased publishing its original titles. The Aguirre Negra and the Cavaliero Phantasma series appeared for the final time in January 1968, having respectively reached 115 and 99 issues. It had this is what Devil C. Bain has it. It has to be wondered what would have happened if there had been a reciprocal reprinting arrangement. What if Aussie readers had a chance to experience translations of the Brazilian material? Now that's quite a good question to talk about elsewhere. And that's quite a good question you would be able to talk about um, in another discussion. But I just turn this around. How do we turn it around? Yeah, I've haircut, but anyways, that is quite a good discussion to actually talk about, and that is quite a good question to actually talk about in a podcast. That I don't even know if we're going to be making any more. I don't even know if we. I don't. I like when I've made a podcast. Obviously, I made one for Christmas. No one watched it, but it's okay. People have a choice. But going back to the question, I reckon if few publications had actually gotten a chance to actually publish Brazilian stories in like decades ago and was able to publish them, and for that audience and for that sort of um, thing to happen back in the old days, say 1960s, 1970s, 80s, etc. If that had happened in those decades, I would say that it could potentially have been popular. It could have been speculated at that time that if we had Brazilian stories back in those decades, it could have meant that we could have seen republication or a refocus on these characters during those decades like 1960s, 70s, 80s, etc. So, what is my opinion on this book? Let me get ears for it. What is my opinion on this book? I really enjoyed it. Like I really enjoyed this book. It's probably one of my favorites out of the series, I would say. And we obviously have another ad for quite a new ad during Christmas time. So you can see the Phantom, the Ghost and the Monster out now on Few Publications out now on Few Publications website. You can get it for basically it's out now, graphic novel number 2, and at this time when this book was getting published, it said put it on your Christmas list. Yeah. Put it on your Christmas list. So you can find this copy of this book. I obviously haven't bought it yet, but you can find it on www.phantomcomic.com.au and is available after December. Yes, it is available after December. It is nearly the end of January. So if you haven't subscribed to the PhantomCave YouTube channel, then as always, subscribe. Comment down below what you would like to see in 2022. Would you like to see new interviews with creators? Would you like to see more of these live streams reviewing new comics and basically reviewing comics and anything else? Comment down below. And as always, keep Phantom Caving, and we'll see yous on Saturday, folks.